Good morning, YouTube world, friends and family. Today, I'm just going to give you a part of my testimony. My pastor and his wife have been giving their testimony at church for the last couple of Sundays, and it's revealed so much about their struggle. And a lot of times, you don't know a person, you don't know what a person's been through. And not to mention, the Bible says that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb, and Jesus did his part being crucified, and the word of our testimony. So today I'm going to give you a little bit of my testimony. To begin with, I was raised up in an extremely dysfunctional family. One of the things, my father taught me how to walk by drinking gin in a bottle cap. And I won't go into details, but I'll simply say the family was extremely dysfunctional. It left some very serious mental effects on me. It bothered me emotionally and mentally. And in a lot of ways, it destroyed certain parts of me at a very young age. Coming up in school, I was stealing from the Rexall drugstore. I was brought up in a way, on one side of me, there was the pimps and the drug dealers of where I lived at. I used to go and hang, there was the drug dealers, excuse me. And on the other side, there were the pimps. So those were my idols. Those were the people that I saw, and they were my role models to me. And so I longed to be a pimp. I longed to be a drug dealer. I used to go to this pool club, this pool hall, where all the drug dealers hang out at. And I was young. I was, I was in, I guess, about 9 or 10 years old, maybe 12 at the most. And I would go hang out at this pool hall with the drug dealers. And they would give me little bits of drugs to run and sell because they thought it was cute or funny. And I would hang out there with them. And of course, I started selling drugs. I tried my hand at pimping. I went to jail really young. I turned 21 in prison. I went to jail at about 17, 16, maybe, well, 17 or 18, I believe. And while I was in jail, I must go back for a little bit. First of all, my mother and father, like most mothers or fathers, forced me to go to church. So I was determined that once I got older, I wasn't going to church. So my Bible became God Drives a Flying Saucer. And basically what that did was explain the things that Jesus did by methods of a flying saucer, tractor beams, and all of that good stuff. Again, I won't go into a lot of detail about that. But I went to prison with my Bible being God Drives a Flying Saucer. And it's a true book. And once I got in prison, the Muslims seem to have it so together. And again, I don't bash any faith. I'm not saying that. I'm just giving you the exploits of my life. And so when I got to prison, the Muslims seemed to have it very together. And so I got with the Muslims. And there was a situation with the Muslims where I didn't stay there. And at the time, I was kind of in turmoil. I was into transcendental meditation. And at the time, the phrase transcendental meditation meant out-of-body experience. It meant that you could fast and you could take yourself, and you could think hard enough where you could take yourself out of your body into another place, and you could still feel and touch the things as if they were actually there, as if you were actually there. And so I was experimenting. I tried Catholicism. I tried Jehovah's Witnesses. I used to go to Kingdom Halls and to meetings. I tried a number of faiths because I just didn't want to be a Christian, if you will. That's what my mother and father tried to shove down my throat, and I was so determined to do the opposite. So I tried some of that, all of that. Anyway, one day in prison, while I was incarcerated, a guy came up to me and told me these women were going to be in church, and they had on very short dresses. Well, and if you went to be prayed for, you could see under the dresses. Well, of course, me being young and my hormones raging, this is what I wanted to do. I never went to the chapel in prison to be saved. So when I got there, sure enough, these young girls who were singing in the choir really had on some short dresses. They were fine. And I was determined, when they gave the altar call, I was one of the first ones to throw up my hand. And I got in like the second row so I could really get a good look without being seen up under the dress. And so I remember the young girl was asking some questions about salvation. And the guy in my way was in my way, so I couldn't quite see up under her dress. And the next thing I remember, the pastor at that time, a chaplain, William Hannawall, I'll never forget, from Brevard Correctional Institution. And the next thing I remember, he was holding me down. And he was praying over me and hugging me, and tears were in his eyes. They said I had gotten saved. I don't know when it happened or how it happened, but they said I had gotten saved. And I never did see under that woman's dress. Well, once I got saved at that point, I must say that I told God, okay, God, I'm saved now. You do your God thing. I'm going to do my Anthony thing. And I'll holler when I need you. And let me go back a little bit and digress. And this is going to be a couple of videos long. But let me go back and digress a little, because when I was young, before I went to prison, I started selling drugs. I started trying to pimp, what I call a 10-penny pimp, because I didn't use physical violence really to keep my women in check. I tried to use mind control to keep my women in check. And what I mean is I played mind games. Like I would draw back to slap them, but I would step on their foot. I would act like I was going to shoot them, but I have spit wads in my shotgun, so when I hit them, all I did was leave a few whelps on them. And women just, I guess they would rather be hit, because the women I tried to pimp, they usually took off and ran. And anytime I saw them again, they just started running and screaming and hollering. And that's a whole nother story. I remember one time in my past before I went to prison where I hit a man in the eye with a stick, me and some family members trying to rob him. And I put his eye out. And every day I walked by this man and I had to see his eye out. And that really bothered me, because I didn't know at that time that God had his eyes set on me. And then an old lady did tell me once, an older lady a long time ago, I guess I was about 22, 23, and she said, son, God wants you. God's got a plan for you, and he's going to put you to work. And you know how we are when we're young. I really ignored the heck out of her, basically. And so I was in a lot of trouble in and out before. Matter of fact, I went to prison for a series of breaking and enterings, is what they call them then. Now I think they call them like home invasions or something like that. They were called breaking and enterings back then anyway. I had like about, I guess about 28 counts. Out of those 28 counts, I wound up getting 5 years and 2 years running consecutive. That means I had to max out the 2 years and 5 years running consecutive. That means I had to max out the 2, then I had to go to work on the 5. I did 4.5 years on that 7 years. In the process, I smoked drugs, plenty of drugs, off and on. Anyway, I was in prison, and that's where I got saved at. And it was like 30-some years later before I actually got serious. And this is where I had religion. And yes, I tried most of the faiths. I went through, again, Catholicism. I went through Islam. I went through Jehovah's Witnesses. I tried Christian Science. I tried Transcendental Meditation. I tried everything almost. And nothing was working. I got to a point there where I was getting so frustrated. I was going to jail and prison so regular until I was really getting frustrated about it. And I tried something called treatment against street crime, but it really wasn't about street crime. It was about drugs, of course. It helped in some ways it didn't help. A lot of what they tried to offer me, I already had. To continue on, okay, after that first stint in prison in Florida, of course, I got out. I went right back to the same old thing, selling drugs, pimping. I started out preaching, and I'll never forget the first time I preached in my mother's church. She was so proud of me. And then I wanted to go save my friends. At least Satan, that's what Satan told me. I wanted to go save my friends. So I started going out to the clubs, and I would hang out at the clubs, and they would always, oh, come on, man, have a drink. Oh, man, you can't have a drink with us. And eventually I found myself one day in the middle of the club in one of those moments of clarity, as they call it, with a quart of beer in one hand and an ounce of pot in the other. And I asked myself, how did you get here? You were preaching. And so I went on from there, and my life went downhill again into the drugs. I started using crack. Oh, God, did I start using crack? I got married for all the wrong reasons, unfortunately, and I asked this young lady to forgive me this day. I didn't know what love was. I didn't know, and I wasn't man enough to admit that. I didn't know how to love. I didn't know how to receive love, and I certainly didn't know how to give love. And I really didn't care to know. Life was good, and I was wild. And I destroyed this woman's heart, mind, and soul. And that's some of those things that you carry with you all your life. You forgive yourself, but it's still there, and it still weighs heavy on your heart. I married her, but I wasn't ready for marriage. And I actually told her that I didn't want to be a husband or a father, and I was ready to go, and she could go if she wanted to. I at one point OD'd on speed, and wound up in the hospital because of this same woman. Because once she left me, I realized the good thing I had, and I got depressed, I guess you could say, and I tried to take an overdose. And God had better intentions. All through my life, I could see where God had better things for me. I was wrestling with a guy on the ground, and I was trying to bend his gun in his face one day, and his friend came by, or a brother, or whoever, I don't know. It was in the middle of the night, and they were trying to rob me. And anyway, when they got up, excuse me. Anyway, when I got up, his friend stood over me while I was on top, and he showed me his gun. And so I just rolled over and laid down, and I told him where the dope and the money was. And the guy took his gun and put it in my face, and he said, "I ought to kill you, MF." And he cocked the trigger. And I looked in his eyes, and I saw that deadpan look in his eyes, and I thought to myself, well, this is it. And I waited. And all of a sudden, he was like, "You got to be about the craziest MF I've ever seen." And he turned around and walked off. Again, today, I know it was God. Then I had no idea. And I've got many, many stories that I can tell, but for the sake of brevity, and I'm not going into a lot of them, but if you want to talk, get in touch with me, Magalina Meso, the amazing Magalina Meso. She knows me very well. You can get in touch with her, and she can get in touch with me. You can get in touch with me on Moko Spade. Prophet 15 is my Street Wars name. Get in touch with me and we'll talk. I'll give you my full testimony if you want, but I won't do it on here. I have a 30-minute time limit on here, honestly. And that's one reason why I won't go into details. But suffice it to say, at one point, I did more drugs than the average person could ever imagine. I did $2,000 a day worth of crack. It's really easy living in Florida. Miami is right there. It's right next to all the places where all the drugs are. Colombia, all of the Cuban places, Cuba, and all of those places where the drugs are. I have found bales of weed floating on Miami Beach. I have found huge cases and bags of weed floating on Miami Beach when I was there at different times. Anyway, I've been through quite a lot. My mother and father, my father was very violent towards my mother. Things were pretty rough in my life. And like I said, give me a call or talk to Magalina. She has her own line and her own videos, Facebook videos, YouTube videos and Facebook page. And go check out some of her stuff sometime. She's a very good person at heart, but she needs a lot of love from people like us. And she can help you get in touch with me, as a matter of fact. But anyway, coming on up to today, I moved to Columbus, Georgia. I ran. There was a lot of pressure on me, and I really couldn't deal with the different pressures. My wife at that time, I could tell her things and I could do things, and you know how we are when we're young. I could tell her, I don't want you anymore. I don't feel like being a husband and a father. And it was fine. But when she started doing it to me, that's when it got too hard for me to handle, like most of us. And I couldn't stay in Florida, and I left. And I came to Georgia. I was on probation at the time, and I forgot about it and went back to Florida and had to go and do the time for that probation. But anyway, I was on probation at the time. I left Florida, and I came here to Georgia to try and start a better life. I was looking for a better way to do things, and I just couldn't find it, and I was getting frustrated. So Florida was really beginning to get on my nerves. And I came here, and guess what I did? I came here with a woman, following a woman. I thought I was in love, but again, I didn't know what love was. And I was in the process now of trying to prove that I could be a good husband and a good father, because I had destroyed someone else's life. I destroyed my son's life. God bless him. I love him so much. And I had destroyed his life by creating him and not being there and being able to be in his life. And I destroyed his mother's life by breaking her heart and ripping it apart. And so I came here, and I got here, and I got with this other woman. I was trying to prove that I could be a good husband and a father for somebody. And I got with another woman here, and I won't call their names. I don't know if they want me to call their names, but I really did do the best I could to love them. I didn't know how. And I didn't know how to get rid of this sickness that was me. Keep going to jail, prison, boys' homes. All my life I've been in those different places. I'm 60 years old, and I've spent probably about 30 years of my life in jails, prisons, and boys' homes for one reason or another. And so I was really, really sick of this, and I really wanted to find a way out. And I tried really hard, but I found myself getting sicker. Mentally, that is. And we won't go into the reasons why. And anyway, I wound up in prison here in Georgia for 10 years. And this was the best thing that ever happened to me. No, I'm not crazy. Prison wasn't the best thing. And God forbid, right now I've been free 6 years. I'm preaching. I have been preaching and teaching and helping the homeless at a church here. And I'm preaching and teaching now. And I'm preaching, of course, now on YouTube and Facebook. But why it was the best is because that's where my religion turned into a relationship with God, in prison. And I used to love to tell people I had to be incarcerated to become completely free. And it's true. Because if I hadn't been in prison, I never would have met a guy. And excuse me, I'm trying to remember his name, plus my sinuses are trying to act up. Thomas something or other. James Thomas, or anyway, this guy from South Carolina. He began my introduction to God and helped me to form this relationship with God. He doesn't know how big a part he played in this. And if he ever sees this video, I owe him my heart. I owe him my life, really. And so he helped me form this relationship with God. And God himself helped me form this relationship with him. I got to know him personally. And one time I was doing 20-some Bible studies every day. And then I had to break it down because I decided I wanted to get into college studies. I found out that the Bible studies themselves were very basic. And I had learned all I could, basically, from the Bible studies themselves. Excuse me. So I got into doing college studies. And I had 4 college studies that I was doing. And they were kind of hard, so I had to cut out all of the other Bible studies and just focus on my college studies. And I eventually became an ordained minister through these studies. Though they were correspondence, I did get out. I did preach in prison, and I did get out and get some preaching experience under my belt through a local church here in Georgia. And today, one of the things, I couldn't quit smoking. Okay, I've seen God reveal himself to me since I formed this relationship in so many ways. I had been working out one morning. I was starving. And the guys came and wanted to play basketball. So after a good strenuous workout, like 1,000 push-ups, running probably about 50 laps around the yard, some setups and everything, incline push-ups and setups and all. And anyway, the guys came and wanted to play basketball. So we played 5 games of basketball. And I was starving. And I went in to ask some of the guys for something to eat. And they were like so many of them there. Oh, my mom and dad bought this stuff for me. They didn't buy it for me to give to other people. And I stopped and I prayed, Lord God, please, you know that I'm hungry. You know that I'm not just asking. But Lord, give me something to eat. Help me to be able to survive in this place. And I was a teacher's aide at the time while I was in prison. And all of a sudden, for no reason, nobody told me anything, they fired me from being a teacher's aide. And I wound up working in the kitchen. And God gave me favor with the stewards in the kitchen. And I went in the kitchen weighing about 175, and I came out weighing about 210 pounds, maybe 220 pounds. I'm still 210 to this day. There are so many blessings. I had a spur in my leg at one time, in my foot at one time, and a bone spur, if you will, and it hurt so bad. God healed that. There was so much that God did for me. When I the very next day morning, as a matter of fact, after I had asked God to feed me, people don't give away pancakes, grits, and eggs in prison. That's one of the best meals they have in there. But I had like 4 people bring me their entire meals. And so God fed me in there. God looked out for me. I didn't have a girlfriend. I didn't have a woman. All I had was God. And God raised me, and he nurtured me, and he fed me, and he prepared me for where I am today, so that I could sit before you here in my living room and give you testimonies of his goodness. I'll go into more detail next time, but I just want to say that God is truly better to you. He will truly be better to you than you will be to yourself. He really will be. I was a fighter. I fought all the time. It's so funny. I really had some really bad anger issues. And one of the Christian brothers in the church, I got in the prison church. I was in the prison choir. I was on the prison praise team. And I was on the prison church setup team. Anytime there was anybody coming from the outside to the prison to preach to us, I was there, and I would help set up and make it ready for them. And in that process, I met good Christian friends and brothers while I was there. And this one brother came to me one day, and he was nervous and he was scared, and he was like, "Brother, God told me to tell you, and I really didn't want to have to do this." He says, "Because it makes me nervous, but you've got an anger problem." And he kind of cringed a little. And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, you got a real bad anger problem. And God told me to tell you that you really need to do something with this because it harms your testimony."